I remove cataracts for a living. That's how I help people see again. It's how I make my money. Which means if there were ever a story I should be tempted to ignore, it would be this one. Because right now, in the United States, something has finally begun that eye doctors have been talking about for years but never had in front of actual American patients at this level before. A real human clinical trial of an eye drop designed to treat age-related cataracts, not a lab dish, not a viral social media claim, not a miracle cure from somebody's aunt's WhatsApp group, and not one of those scientists may have found stories that disappears 48 hours later. An actual randomized, double-masked, placebo-controlled U.S. pilot study has started enrolling patients. And if you only hear that part, you might think we're one step away from the end of cataract surgery. But slow down, because this story has two sides. On one side, this could become one of the biggest breakthroughs in eye care in decades. On the other side, we have been here before. Big promises, beautiful headlines, early excitement, and then reality. So today, I want to show you the truth, what this new cataract drop really is, why scientists are testing it now, why so many people online are confidently wrong about natural cataract cures, what happened the last time lanosterol made headlines, and the one missing number behind the impressive-sounding claims that almost nobody is talking about. And if you or someone in your family has cataracts, this matters more than you think. Because if these drops work, they could change when we operate, who needs surgery, and how early we can intervene. But if they don't, I don't want you wasting time, money, and vision chasing false hope. I'm a cataract surgeon. I spend my days dealing with cloudy lenses, blurred vision, glare, and patients who just want one simple answer. Can eye drops really cure cataracts? Here's the honest answer. Not yet. Maybe one day. And this new trial is exactly why that answer is suddenly more interesting than it used to be. But before you believe the hype, you need to understand what a cataract actually is. Because if you miss that part, you can be fooled by almost every fake cataract claim on the internet. Inside your eye, behind the colored part, sits your natural lens. When you're younger, that lens is beautifully clear. Light passes through it, gets focused sharply, and your world looks crisp. But over time, the proteins inside that lens begin to change. They get damaged. They lose their structure, they misfold, they clump, they scatter light. And instead of a crystal clear lens, you slowly get a cloudy one. That clouding is a cataract, not a film sitting on top of the eye, not dirt you can rinse away, not something you can wipe off, not some sticky layer waiting to be dissolved by kitchen oil. It is a structural problem inside the lens itself. That one fact destroys a lot of nonsense immediately. Because when people say, just put this oil in your eye, or use this homemade drop and the cataract melts away, they're ignoring basic anatomy. A cataract lives deeper inside the eye, inside the natural lens. So if someone is selling you a surface solution for a deep lens problem, your skepticism should go up instantly. Now what does a cataract actually feel like? Usually it starts quietly. Vision gets a little blurrier, night driving becomes harder, headlights start exploding into glare. You need more light to read, colors look duller, your glasses prescription keeps changing. You feel like the world is losing contrast, even if you can still read some letters on a chart. That's why cataracts are tricky. People think it's just weak eyesight getting worse. But often it's not the eye getting weaker, it's the lens getting cloudier. And right now, once that cataract becomes visually significant, we only have one proven treatment that reliably fixes it. We remove the cloudy lens and replace it with a clear artificial lens. That's cataract surgery. And to be clear, modern cataract surgery works extremely well. It is one of the most successful procedures in all of medicine. So when I say this new eye drop story matters, I am not saying surgery is broken. I'm saying the idea of treating cataracts before surgery, pharmacologically, biologically, non-invasively, has enormous potential if it proves real. Because imagine catching the process earlier. Imagine slowing the damage, maybe delaying surgery for years, maybe helping patients who aren't ready for an operation, maybe treating certain kinds of cataracts before they become severe. That's the dream, and that dream is what this new U.S. trial is built around. The investigational drop now being studied is a lanosterol-derived eye drop. That matters because lanosterol has been one of the most talked about molecules in cataract research for about a decade. The new study is a multi-center, randomized, double-masked, placebo-controlled pilot trial in people with age-related cataracts. Those words may sound boring, but they matter a lot. Multicenter means it's not just one doctor's experience. Randomized means patients aren't just cherry-picked into a preferred group. Double-masked means bias is reduced because people don't simply know what they received. Placebo-controlled means we can compare the drop against expectation, not just optimism. That is the kind of design you want if you actually care whether something works. And yes, that's why this trial is different from the noise online, because a viral testimony is not data. Worked for me is not the same as evidence. Now here's where the story gets more exciting. The companies behind the drop point to earlier exploratory findings outside the US, saying that between 50.0% and 86.4% of participants achieved vision of 20/40ths or better after 12 to 24 weeks of treatment. And I know what happens when people hear that. They stop listening after the percentage. They hear up to 86.4%. They hear 20/40ths or better. They hear eye drops for cataracts, and their brain fills in the rest. So the drops worked, so cataracts were reversed. So surgery is finished. Not so fast, because there is a critical question hiding inside that statistic. What was the patient's starting vision? This is one of the most important questions in the entire story. If someone begins at 20/40ths and ends at 20/40ths, that sounds good in a press release, but it doesn't prove improvement. If someone begins just slightly worse and ends slightly better, that is not the same thing as reversing a significant cataract. If someone sees better temporarily because of measurement variability, tear film changes, lighting conditions, or selection bias, that still doesn't prove the lens itself truly cleared. What you want to know is not just whether some patients reached a threshold. You want to know, how much did they improve? How many lines did they gain? Did lens opacity objectively decrease? Did contrast sensitivity improve? Did glare improve? Did quality of life improve? Did they delay surgery? Did they avoid surgery? That is what matters. And until we see those kinds of outcomes clearly, a promising signal remains just that, a signal, not a cure. Now, to understand why lanosterol is even in this conversation, we need to go back, because the reason this headline exists today is because of what happened in 2015. That year, a major paper in Nature caused a wave of excitement across ophthalmology and beyond. The basic idea was elegant. Researchers were looking at families affected by certain cataract-related genetic problems and found links involving an enzyme connected to lanosterol production. That raised a big question. If lanosterol is involved in keeping lens proteins from clumping, could adding it back help prevent or reverse cataract formation? In the lab, the idea looked fascinating. Lanosterol appeared to reduce protein aggregation. There were encouraging findings in animal-related work and in lens experiments. And suddenly people started imagining a future where instead of removing cataracts surgically, we might be able to treat the lens chemistry itself. That was a huge deal, because cataracts are not some rare niche problem. They affect millions upon millions of people around the world. A safe, effective drop would be transformative, especially in places where surgery is harder to access. So yes, the excitement made sense, but this is exactly where science and internet hype separate. A breakthrough paper is the start of a question, not the end of one. Because after that excitement came the part that doesn't trend as well on social media: replication. Other scientists tried to see whether lanosterol could really do what the early promise suggested, and the results got messy very quickly. In one study, using human age-related cataract nuclei removed during real cataract surgeries, lanosterol did not reverse the opacity. That matters because now we're not talking about idealized lab conditions or animal models. We're talking about actual human cataract material. Then another major study looked at oxysterols like lanosterol and found no convincing evidence that they restored lens clarity or dissolved cataracts the way people had hoped. That is a serious problem if your headline is basically "cataracts can now be dissolved." Because if follow-up work fails to confirm the mechanism in meaningful ways, the miracle narrative starts to crack. But here's where I want to be fair. That does not automatically mean the entire concept is dead. It means the easy version of the story was wrong. And in medicine, those are not the same thing. Why? Because drug development is hard, really hard. And one of the biggest challenges here isn't just what molecule you use, it's whether that molecule can actually get where it needs to go. Think about the target. The cataract is inside the lens. So a drop placed on the eye surface has to survive the tear film, penetrate the cornea, move through the front of the eye, reach the lens in meaningful concentration, and then interact with proteins that may have been changing for years or decades. That is not simple. A molecule looking good in a test tube is not the same thing as that molecule solving a dense human cataract in a living eye. And age-related cataracts are not all identical either. Some are more nuclear, some are more cortical, some are more posterior subcapsular, some are early and subtle. Some are mature and dense, so if cataract drops ever work, they may not work for every cataract, every stage, every lens, or every patient. That's another place where viral headlines mislead people. The future probably does not look like this magical liquid that turns a dense white cataract back into a crystal clear teenage lens overnight. That is fantasy. A more realistic future, if these therapies succeed, may be something like this: a drop that helps early cataracts, a drop that slows progression, a drop that improves contrast before the cataract gets severe, a drop that works for a specific subtype, a drop that delays surgery rather than replacing it for everyone, and honestly, even that would be huge. Now let's talk about the lie that refuses to die online: castor oil, because if you spend even 10 minutes searching cataract cures on the internet, sooner or later someone will tell you to put castor oil in your eyes. They'll say it dissolves cataracts, they'll say surgery is a scam. They'll say ophthalmologists don't want you to know, they'll say your vision will become clear in days or weeks. No, there is no convincing clinical evidence that castor oil dissolves, reverses, or cures age-related cataracts. And once again, basic anatomy explains why. Castor oil on the surface of the eye can affect the tear film or eyelids. A cataract is inside the lens. Those are not the same location. Those are not the same tissue. Those are not the same problem. Now let me give you the nuance most people skip. Can properly prepared sterile castor oil-related formulations play a role in ocular surface treatment? In some contexts, yes. Can eyelid or tear film improvement make someone feel like their vision is smoother or more comfortable? Absolutely. Can less dryness make vision feel a little clearer? Yes, but that is not the same thing as removing clouded lens proteins. Feeling better is not the same as dissolving a cataract, and this is where people get trapped. Their eyes feel less dry, the tear film smooths out, vision fluctuates a little less, and suddenly they think the cataract is reversing. It isn't. And please do not put random household, cosmetic, or non-sterile oils in your eyes hoping for a miracle. Your eye is not a DIY chemistry project. Now, if lanosterol has had mixed results, you might ask a smart question: is anyone else working on cataract drops through different pathways? Yes, and this is one reason I don't dismiss the whole category, because serious researchers are still pushing. One approach involves EDTA-based drops aimed at early-stage age-related cataracts. In a subgroup analysis from a randomized placebo-controlled study, a small set of patients with early cataract and contrast sensitivity loss showed better outcomes in mesopic contrast sensitivity compared with placebo after treatment. That is interesting, very interesting. But again, keep your standards high. It was a subgroup analysis, the sample was small, the placebo response was not trivial, and that is not the same as proving reliable reversal of visually significant cataracts. It is a signal, a direction, a clue, not the final answer. Then there's another compound called VP1001, designed to stabilize lens crystalline proteins so they are less likely to misfold and clump in the first place. That's a different strategy. Instead of trying to magically wash away the damage after it's advanced, you try to preserve protein behavior earlier in the process. Preclinical results in animal models have been encouraging, but animal models are not human approval, and one of the most futuristic directions may be even more radical, helping the eye generate the relevant protective chemistry itself. In 2025, researchers reported that delivering mRNA encoding lanosterol synthase improved cataracts in rat models. That is fascinating science. But read that sentence carefully. Rats, not people, not approved therapy, not your pharmacy next week. Still, it tells you something important. The field is not sleeping on this problem. The field is actively searching for ways to intervene before surgery becomes the only option. So where does that leave the average person watching this and wondering what to do right now? Here's the practical truth. If you have a visually significant cataract today, surgery is still the proven answer, not an internet bottle, not a home remedy, not a miracle supplement, not wishful thinking. But that doesn't mean you're powerless before surgery becomes necessary. There are things that actually make sense. Don't smoke. Smoking is associated with cataract risk and with damage throughout the body, including the eyes. If you have diabetes, work on good blood sugar control with your medical team. High blood sugar and eye damage are not a casual combination. Protect your eyes from ultraviolet exposure with proper UV blocking sunglasses. Be thoughtful about steroid use. Steroids can be incredibly important and sometimes absolutely necessary, so never stop a prescribed steroid on your own. But long-term exposure can be associated with cataract formation, and it's worth having that discussion with your doctor when appropriate. And most importantly, get regular eye exams, because not every blurry eye problem is a cataract. Glaucoma can steal vision, macular disease can distort vision, corneal disease can blur vision, diabetic eye disease can damage vision, dry eye can blur vision, and some of those can overlap with cataract symptoms in confusing ways. You do not want to sit at home assuming you just have cataracts while something else is quietly getting worse. Now let's come back to the big question: can eye drops really cure cataracts? If by cure you mean a proven, available, FDA-approved drop that reliably clears age-related cataracts in real-world human patients and replaces surgery, no, that does not exist today. If by cure you mean a scientific possibility that may one day help selected patients, especially in earlier stages, and may reduce or delay the need for surgery, that possibility is now serious enough that real U.S. human trials are underway. And that is not nothing. That is the reason this story deserves your attention. But attention is not the same as blind belief. So here's my checklist for what any cataract drop has to prove before I would tell patients to get excited in the real world. First, show that the drug actually reaches the lens in useful amounts. Second, show objective improvement in the cataract itself, not just vague optimism. Third, show functional improvement people can feel: better vision, better contrast, less glare, better night performance. Fourth, show that the benefit lasts. And fifth, prove safety, because the eye is unforgiving. A treatment that sounds revolutionary but creates new problems is not a breakthrough, it's a setback. And there's one more thing I would want to see. Does it truly delay surgery in a meaningful percentage of patients? Because that is where the real-world impact lives. Not in headlines, not in percentages without context, not in dramatic thumbnails, in actual patients living better for longer. So no, this is not the end of cataract surgery. Not today. If you already need surgery, do not cancel your appointment because of a headline. But also, don't ignore this development, because for the first time in a way that deserves real attention, we are watching a properly designed U.S. human trial test whether a cataract drop can do something medicine has wanted for a very long time: treat the lens before we have to remove it. That is the truth, not miracle cure, not fake hope, not impossible fantasy either. A real scientific question, a real clinical trial, a real chance, and still a very long way from a guaranteed answer. So when you hear someone say cataract surgery is over, they are getting ahead of the evidence. And when someone says eye drops for cataracts are impossible, they may also be speaking too confidently. The honest position is in the middle. Promising? Yes. Proven? No. Worth watching? Absolutely. Because sometimes the future of medicine does begin exactly like this: a small trial, a lot of skepticism, a few promising signals, and one question nobody can answer yet. Will this become the first eye drop that genuinely changes cataract care? We don't know, but now, finally, we may get data that is good enough to matter. And until we do, protect your eyes, ignore the fake cures, respect the science, and don't let desperate hope make decisions that evidence has not earned.